Chapter 48. Who could have prevented it? In the few days allowed to them, experienced and talented European statesmen in July 1914 scrambled to try to prevent war from breaking out. Why did they fail? Were they, as some say, simply not skillful enough? In the 90 years that have elapsed, speculation as to what could have been done has been practically endless. Could anything have been done? The common assumption today is that everybody wants peace if it can be had on acceptable terms. What Europe did not understand at the time was that, exceptionally, it was not true of two governments in 1914. Vienna did not merely want to get its way with Serbia, it wanted to provoke a war with Serbia. Berlin did not want to get its way with Russia, it wanted to provoke a war with Russia. In each case it was war itself that the government wanted, or, put more precisely, it wanted to crush its adversary to an extent that only a successful war makes possible. It takes at least two to keep the peace, but it takes only one to start a war. If a government is determined to bring on a war, no appeasement, no matter how extensive or imaginative, will restrain it. Europe, having failed to understand what happened to it in 1914, had to be taught that lesson all over again in the aftermath of Munich in 1938-39. Only countervailing power will stop a government bent on launching an invasion. In the case of Austria's war, Vienna recognized that it could not get away with attacking Serbia unless Berlin offered protection. Given German cover, it was free to do what it liked. Of course Austria also needed to obtain, and did, the approval and support of Hungary. Thereafter nothing could stop Austria-Hungary's march toward war. Europe's statesmen were in the dark about Austria's motives, and therefore were disoriented. They assumed that the Habsburg Empire was what it pretended to be, a country with a grievance that it wanted remedied. In fact, it did not want its grievance remedied, it wanted a pretext. Austria did not seek justice, for that would have deprived it of an excuse for doing what it really wanted to do, go to war. It issued an ultimatum, not in order to bully Serbia into accepting it, but rather to force Serbia into rejecting it. Of course the cumbersome machinery of the Austro-Hungarian government moved slowly. By early August, the Habsburg armies had not initiated the hostilities that they should have concluded in July. But, at however snail-like a pace, the dual monarchy moved straight ahead toward its goal, never stopping, never deviating, never allowing itself to be distracted or turned aside. It was headed for the battlefield, and it would allow nothing to keep it from going there. Could Britain or France or even Russia have done anything differently to stop the Austrian war on Serbia? Now we have the satisfaction of knowing that nothing they could have done would have kept Austria from attacking Serbia. Austria wanted war and could have been restrained only by Germany. Herewith two counterfactuals, two might-have-beens. The first is that the German government might have followed the Kaiser's orders the week of July 27 and withdrawn support of the dual monarchy unless it agreed to peace on German terms. The result might have been a dazzling diplomatic triumph for the German-speaking allies. Peace probably would have been secured on terms favorable to Austria and Serbia would have been severely punished. A second counterfactual, Russia might have taken itself out of the conflict. This might have happened if Russia had been convinced of Serbian guilt in the Sarajevo affair. Russia could have made common cause with Austria against the regicides and terrorists, and given Vienna carte blanche, as Germany had done, to solve the problems as best it could, in its dealings with Serbia. Had Russia done so, it would have deprived Germany's military leaders of the conditions and pretexts necessary to initiate their proposed war against Russia and France. A world war would at least have been postponed and at best prevented. In the case of Germany's war, rather more stood in the way of those who wanted to initiate hostilities. The labor movement and the Social Democrats in Germany had to be won over, but that was accomplished by Bateman during the turbulent last week of July. The complicated requirements of Germany's generals, the things that had to be done before they could start their war, had to do with Austria. As seen earlier, Vienna had to be persuaded to commit its armies for one purpose, the Serbian venture, but then instead to use them in another venture, Germany's crusade against Russia, which Berlin was presenting at home as Russia's crusade against Germany. All having been achieved, however, there was nothing to stop the German government from starting a war, at the time most favorable to it, which turned out to be August 1, 1914. The strongest power on the continent, with the most powerful army in the world, was doing what it deemed necessary to maintain its position. It is difficult to resist the conclusion that nothing could have stopped it. A question asked throughout the 20th century in one way or another was put this way by historian James Joll: why, since war had been avoided in the immediately preceding crises, 1908, 1911, 1913, was not avoided in 1914? One answer is that in the previous crises none of the great powers had wanted to have a war. In 1914 two of them did. And one reason that Germany did not want to go to war in those previous crises was that it could not count on Austria, and Germany's generals were convinced that without Austrian troops holding back the Russians during the opening weeks of the war, they might not win.